Welcome, everyone, to the Pick Six podcast, where we discuss the biggest stories in college football. I'm your host, Chris Chang, and joining me, as always, is my favorite. Nah, I don't even know what to give you. It's Turkey Day. It's a day after Turkey Day. We're both hungover from the food, but who cares? Rudy's joining us again. My boy, Rudy Tamarchio. Rudy, it's kind of a bittersweet day. We have made it to the end of the regular season. This flew by a little faster than I thought. Our Canes are heading up north to take on the Orange Men, the Orange
Used to
Fighters.
be orange, but now they're just straight orange.
Yeah, what is an orange exactly? Who
Uh,
is Syracuse? What are they?
so I think it was a Native American reference when they were orange men before, and then just to kind of remove that sense to be more sensitive, they just changed it to orange.
Okay, politically correct. I like it. Okay, sure. But well, anyways, let's get into it. The series leans to Miami heavily, 16-7. We've won 16 games. They've won 7. Current win streak belongs to Miami by 6 games from 1999 to 2017, which is the last time they played them. But you could technically make that from 1999 to now because 2017 was the last time we played them. Um, we beat them 27-19 here in Miami. Syracuse is currently 8-3, 4-3 in conference play, 5-1 at home, which is very important, and has won their last 3 games. This is a must-win game to get to Charlotte. Rudy, what do you think are the keys to success for Miami?
I don't think this is much of a surprise. I do like the way Miami kind of lines up against Syracuse, but they need to come out hot offensively and they come out hot defensively, and they have to use it those improvements they made last week. They need to shut down that passing game of Syracuse pretty quickly because Kyle McCord likes to get the ball out quickly. I believe he has either I can't remember what the end of last week looked like, but at one point he was outpacing Cam Ward in passing yards.
Yeah, he is.
So they throw a lot. They
Yeah,
throw a
they
lot.
do. They do. Kyle McCord has the ninth fastest release in the nation, which will not bode well for our pass rush or our secondary. That's kind of a like double-headed sword or double-bladed sword for Syracuse because again, while we did get pressure last week, in the last couple games, our D line has not gotten the pressure they were getting at the beginning of the season. So it'll be interesting to see if we can get back there because with that said, there is a caveat in there. Syracuse's O line is atrocious. They're really not that good, which is why
Yep.
McCord has to get the ball out so quickly. So it'll be a very interesting matchup to see if our ends, again, once again, we're talking about Barron and Bain, if they can get to that backfield, hold them in, and then force some pressure with Kyle McCord because that is the one thing Kyle McCord does not do well under. I mean, that's obviously like a duh statement. Most quarterbacks do not do well under pressure. But Kyle McCord, especially, we saw him against pick throw 5 picks, I think it was uh, 3 or 2 back-to-back pick sixes, which were wild. So it'll be interesting to see. Syracuse is a very pass-heavy team. They actually lean to the pass 63% of the time. But the funny thing is they actually do not pass downfield. They're not like us. They don't like to air raid it. They're like these little quick slants and shallow passes, which is kind of our weakness. How do you think they play against our secondary?
I'm really interested. I don't want to say too much about how it really depends on who's officiating this game because
Ooh.
I'm really interested to see like how it plays out. Because if Miami secondary can play the way that Syracuse's secondary likes to play, which is very physical and jam at the line of scrimmage, it should help. The one mismatch that I'm a little concerned about, though, is going to be Aronde Gadsden. That's a name that anybody in South Florida should know really well because that is a former Miami Dolphins tight end, played at the University of Georgia. His kid plays at Syracuse. He happens to
Yeah.
be what, like 6'6" or 6'8" or something like that. He's a big dude.
He's our
And
tight
that
end,
is
right?
one. Go ahead.
Is that the tight end you're talking about?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
he's a
that's
big
one
guy.
mismatch that I'm not happy about. And I think, look, if it's a quick hit offense, if they're going to run a lot of quick throws, slants, hitches, I feel like Miami should be prepared for that. And I think the way that they've changed their defensive personnel, they're running 3 safeties now in the secondary with
Yeah, I
Mish
saw
Powell
that.
coming down and playing nickel, having Zaquan Patterson and Jaden Harris back there. You should have Damari Brown back. This is the last regular season game of the year. You'll have Elijah Alston, the defensive tackle, back. This is the healthiest Miami's defense has looked since week one. So if they can put in another performance like they did week one or like they did against Wake Forest, with the exception of that opening defensive drive, it should feel a little better for Miami.
Yeah, I'm watching out for Kyle McCord again because they're built for these quick slants and shallow passes. of between 5 to 7 yards. That's like their Goldilocks little bed area for passing. I wouldn't be surprised if they hit us with the dink and dunk, the quick screens, the running back running out to the flat, and turning a quick 6 yard pass into a 20 to 30 yard play. Just because tackling in open field has kind of been a challenge for us. I mean, again, at the beginning of the season, which was great against Florida, yes, they would get these passes off and they would get completions, but they were immediately tackled. The yak was very low. We have now seen through the course of the entire season that does not exactly play to our strong suits. I think we did a little bit better last week, but I think it's going to be key for the defense to get the pressure. And then, I mean, if they can drop into zone, and we can, and I'm trying to think. I think zone will work better for us than man coverage, just because, like you were saying, we're going to have the three high safeties that'll allow maybe one of them to play a nickel if we need to call an audible on the defensive side of it. And so I feel better in that aspect. My worry, though, is like I said, is if they continue with these dink and dunk passes, and we're forcing like Kiko to like follow this tight end. I don't know. I mean, do you think Kiko can keep up with their tight end?
I don't think he's going to be the one that's going to be much in pass coverage. I feel like you're going to use Kiko as kind of like a fifth defensive lineman because we've done a little bit better at bringing pressure. And if it's one thing that you can do against Syracuse, it's bring pressure. I mean, look, UConn was getting to Kyle McCord. So if you can beat those defensive, if you can use your defensive ends and beat their tackles, that's where I feel like the game is going to be won. And I feel like this is where Tyler Barron and Ruben Bain really need to show their speed because I'm watching the film of how they played against UConn. I'm thinking our guys have at least two steps on this defensive line. They should be getting there. They should be forcing some bad throws. So it's not so much getting sacks and forcing tackles more so than just forcing bad decision making or rushing a throw.
Yeah, I think on our side, looking at our offense, it's a great matchup for our wide receivers. I feel
Yep.
really confident, especially in the slot with Xavier Strepo. I think he should have a breakout day tomorrow. I think he should really. I would like to see 150 yards because I think his season high so far was like 163, and I think he can do that against the Syracuse defense. And the only reason why I think that is because Syracuse's defense only has two players with three or more sacks this season. So
Yep.
their D line should not be a threat. Again, I say this, but then I know as I say this, I'm gonna want to reel it back in. But it's like our O line, I think, can hold that wall and keep Cam Ward's jersey very clean. And then and again, we know when Cam is given time, he makes magic happen, right? It's when the pocket breaks down, when they're covering our receivers too tight, which again, this secondary is not good. They're kind of like our secondary. So it's like I feel good about that. I think statistically, while we have the advantage in almost every area, and again, said that about the Georgia Tech game we lost, said the same thing about the Wake Forest game we won. This is where I was looking, and I was kind of hit with a little area of concern, which is the margins against common opponents. So Syracuse has been better against everyone that we have common opponents against. They beat Virginia Tech by 7. We only beat them by 4. They beat Cal by 8. We only obviously beat them by 1. And then they actually beat Georgia Tech by 3, where we lost by 5. So it's a little, I'm like, okay, let's not, I believe we're going to win. I think we're going to win for sure. I was actually watching Dono while I was at the gym earlier today, and the dude stole my score exactly. I was saying 41-35. I think that's probably going to be the score. I know
Mhm.
it's
I don't
it's
want it that close.
I
I
I don't
really
want it.
don't.
I don't either, but the thing with Kyle McCord is I've been saying this all season. I'm like, guys, do not sleep on Syracuse. I've been saying it since the rip. I'm like, I think Georgia Tech and Syracuse were probably our two biggest stumbling blocks, only because Georgia Tech, we lost to them last year and they played us really well. And they obviously did beat us. And I knew we would lose one game. And then I said Syracuse just because they're built very similar to us in the sense that they can score pretty quickly and they can get the ball. But not only that, interesting fact too, they actually by 2 minutes, they actually have a very similar time of possession. I think Miami and Syracuse are the 1 and 2 teams in the ACC who have the best time of possession. So again, that's how Georgia Tech beat us, was they kept the ball for 10 extra minutes. Teams that stay in the game usually are doing it because they're holding the ball and they're keeping Cam Ward out of the game. So, I mean, again, besides that one blowout loss to Pitt, all their other games they've lost, it's only been by one possession. Very similar to a Kansas thing. So I don't think the boys will be sleeping on it, but it's definitely going to be, I think, a lot closer, which is why I picked that 41-35. You don't have to give a score
I
if you don't want to. But what's your
Yeah,
thought?
I like that it's in a dome. It's gonna be 68 degrees. I think that plays well to what Miami wants to do. So I'm not. I don't know. I like the way they match up. I really do. And it's one of those where I don't feel as concerned as I have been in previous weeks.
Yeah,
I
I don't
think
me
those could be
neither.
famous last words, but
I know.
I feel good.
It's funny because, like, the confidence when you're thinking about it logically, you're like, "Absolutely, this should not be a test. This should be a very definitive and confident win." But as you say these things, it's like that Georgia Tech game, man. Like, I just have such PTSD from the show we did where I we were going through the stats and it was like, man, like on paper, this shouldn't even be a challenge. And then, and more importantly, is you do the eye test. And I've been watching Syracuse because I've known they were going to be a threat to us, especially just knowing, even if we didn't lose to Georgia Tech, right? Let's just say we were undefeated up until now, the threat of having a team and like right after a holiday as your last game going into the ACC championship. I mean, again, it's a little bit different because if we were undefeated, we could still afford to lose this game and still go. Now we have to win to make it in. Um, I I I, I still have a slight hesitation, but the logic in my brain says 41-35 just because they're going to put up points, but it won't look as close when you watch the game as it sounds in the scoreboard, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, it's another week and another batch of rankings. Rudy, we are in the final stretch of the season. We have Oregon at 1, Ohio State at 2, Texas at 3, Penn State at 4, Notre Dame at 5, and Miami at 6 as our top 6 team. Bama and Ole Miss drop out of the top 12. Indiana only falls to 10 after a blowout loss to Ohio State. SMU jumping up 4 spots to 9. And UGA and Tennessee both benefiting from the SEC chaos this past weekend, hopping up to 3 spots to number 8. Rudy, which of these top 12 teams has room to survive should chaos ensue this weekend?
This is such a hard way to go, right? Because like
Yeah.
I'm looking at this and I know all the projections say that there's going to be two ACC teams regardless of what happens, and I don't know if that's really going to happen. I think if both teams win out, yes. If it's a Miami SMU ACC championship game, if Miami wins that game, I think you get both teams in by the skin of their teeth. But if something else happens, I don't think you get two ACC teams. You should, based on the resumes of everybody else in the country and the ensuing chaos that could happen this week too. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think a lot of the places are kind of set, barring absolute insanity, because you could have some potential non-conference losses this weekend that doesn't affect their conference championship, but does affect their college football playoff standings, which
Yeah.
I think might happen.
I honestly think barring a blowout, so whether we get blown out by SMU or SMU blows us out, I think if it's a close game or it's a competitive game, I truly do think I think both ACC teams will get in. I think just from the cold shoulder that FSU got last year, the stiffing they got last year, I think that's just going to naturally, that narrative is going to come back. It's going to rear its ugly head around. And I think they'll, again, if it's as long as it's competitive. Now, if we blow SMU out, I think sadly that's going to doom their chances. But conversely, if God forbid we get blown out, I think that's what the media and what a lot of these pundits have been waiting for is for them to go, see, we told you they're not real, they're fakes, they're not going to make it.
Yep,
Which
and that's why Cam Ward didn't deserve to, get the Johnny Unitas Golden Alarm Award and all these other awards before the even Heisman comes out. And yeah, it's ridiculous the disrespect that he's
it's
getting, but it's
it's
a team
funny.
game.
I
That's why
I
they want to do it.
struggled. I struggled wholeheartedly not to put that as a story that we were going to cover was the Cam Ward stiffing because I just don't want to be negative and I don't want to sound like too much of a homer and make the show all about
Yeah,
Cam Ward. But like I just will say this. I think it's insanity the amount of disrespect that Cam Ward is getting this season. And to be honest, selfishly, I love it because for the type of person that Cam is, he's got that killer Mamba mentality. And he said it from the rip, from the beginning of the season. He goes, I play with an anger. I play with a chip on my shoulder. I'm pissed that I was overlooked and I know I'm good. And if that's already how he was thinking at the beginning of the season, after doing all the magic he's done this season so far, there is no way in hell he does not come out this weekend on fire. Again, I know
Yep.
he's been a little cold, he's been a little iffy, hasn't been the same Cam Moore the last 2 or 3 games, but it's just something tells me there's gonna be a killer instinct that's gonna that should, okay? I'm not gonna say it will definitely happen because I don't wanna jinx us, but narratively, like when you look at the history of sports and you look at highly competitive people and you look at people who are just insanely talented, this is a recipe for them to go out and show out. And I really think Cam's going to do it this weekend. But which of these bubble teams do you think is the most deserving to get into the playoff should chaos also ensue this weekend?
Mm.
Like
Who do you put on the
who
bubble right now? Who do you have? Who do you consider on the bubble?
So I would say Clemson for sure, Alabama, Ole Miss, who's throttling Mississippi State right now. I would say those are the three bubble teams. I don't think South Carolina is a bubble team, even if they beat
No.
Clemson, just because the two teams ahead of them, Alabama and Ole Miss, beat them. So it's
Yep.
like, how do you rectify that? Again, this is the committee. There is no logic with them, even though they say there's logic and they say that head to head matters, which we've seen up until now has not mattered.
No.
Um, I would say those three teams realistic, maybe an Arizona State, but see, Arizona State can still get in if they win the Big 12. I don't think if they again, if they lose the Big 12, they're definitely not getting in. So to me, the three, and then Tulane lost
Yep.
last night to Memphis. So to me, like the bubble teams to watch are realistically Clemson, Alabama, and Ole Miss. Do you think either of any of those three teams will make it in? Should we see like Vanderbilt beat Tennessee, Georgia Tech beat Georgia, SMU? No, well, SMU could lose to us and they get blown out. Because remember, we still do technically have the championship Saturday.
Yep.
They still get to vote on that. Now, they've said that they're not going to penalize people who lose in their championship, but again, we
You know they're
anything can
going to.
happen, and then they're
Yeah.
going to. So, to me, again, that's why I said again, if SMU's, I think sadly, Penn State, Indiana, I think Texas, even if they lose to Texas A&M this week, we'll talk about that game later. I think they still make it in. I think Ohio State, even if they lose to Michigan, especially if they lose to Michigan, I think they're definitely still in no matter what because then they don't have to play for the championship. And then, I mean, you could have that's actually some, let's talk about that really quick
Yeah.
because we're going to, we'll go into that, but just specifically in the playoff context, not the actual game. Let's say a miracle happens and Michigan beats Ohio State. Ohio State does not have to play for the Big Ten championship anymore. So they'll probably fall like somewhere between 8 and 11, I'll say, right? But Penn State loses to Oregon in the championship. Is Penn State still in the playoff as a two
By
loss?
logic, you would think they should be in over Ohio State in that scenario because they actually played for the conference championship. And if you lose to like what a 5 loss Big Ten team like Michigan, yeah, rivalry game, throw the record out the window. But in the eyes of the committee, that should be a bad loss for Ohio State. So it's one of those where you don't even look at it as playing. You played the top end of the conference. You played middle of the pack, lower tier, and you lost. So in that way, I would almost argue that
But again, it's a
Ohio State
rivalry
should be in.
game. It's a
I
rivalry
know.
game, and they as stupid as it sounds, they really value that. And
Yep.
so you'll have a two-loss Ohio State team obviously getting jumped by a one-loss Penn State team whose loss is to Ohio State. But if they got into the Big Ten championship and lost to Oregon, that would give them two losses. I don't think you can keep. I don't think you could. Again, even if I'm like trying to picture the bracket right now in the rankings, I don't
Yeah.
think you can keep a two-loss Ohio State, a two-loss Penn State, even though their second loss came in the championship, and a one-loss Indiana
Yeah. I
going to the
agree.
playoff. I think again, I think Penn State's actually going to be, now that we're really kind of talking this through. I think Penn State's actually probably cheering for Ohio State this weekend because I think they want to pull a Lane Kiffin and not have
Yeah.
to play for the because if I was Penn State, that's what I would hope for. I wouldn't want to play for the Big Ten. I would want to keep my home field advantage right now, keep that 4 spot and ride into the sunset, you know?
And of those 3 bubbles that you were talking about, I think Ole Miss probably has the best chance at all of that because if you look at Clemson, like, I think it's kind of a long shot. They beat South Carolina. I think they're playing so well in the way that they match up with each other. Yeah, that game's in Death Valley, but you know what? South Carolina won in Death Valley 2 years ago also.
That's
against what
true.
I would argue is a better Clemson team. So, yeah, of any of those to find their way in, it's probably going to be Ole Miss. But even then, it's hard to justify with the way college football has gone this year and how it may continue to go this weekend.
I've kind of shown my hand. I just wanted to ask this before we move on to the next story. If God forbid we lose to SMU, or first let's just we win to Syracuse, we beat Syracuse, we make it to the ACC championship, but we lose to SMU. Do you still think we make the playoffs?
Uh, how does it look? Do they keep it close? Do they
Yeah.
get blown out?
I mean, I told you, I think if they keep it close, I think we both make it. But
Yeah, I
and I
agree.
told you, I think if we blown out, I think, by blown out, I'm using at least 3 possessions, so at least 3 touchdowns. So if we lose by three
Yeah, I
touchdowns,
don't.
do you think we still make it in or no?
I don't think Miami's in if that happens.
No.
Not with this committee. No, I mean,
Mm.
look at how they. The thing that would be really terrible about it is that because if you go back to the individual awards too, there's disrespect, yes, but there's a lack of recognizing the talent being there. They've been talking about Miami is just getting by and having this great offense, but oh, if that great offense isn't working, well, it's Charlotte, it's cold, it's December. Well, what are they going to do on the if they're not going to be the conference champions, so they're going to be one of those at larges. What are they going to do? They can go on the road and play Ohio State or somebody, another cold atmosphere. They're just going to say, well, we had our chance and we didn't do it.
Well, I'll tell you
As
something
terrible
really,
as that is.
really funny. So ESPN, if you go to their website and you click on the college football playoff, they have like a predictor and you can put in and what you think they're thinking. And I actually put that in, and it still said we would still make the playoffs, even if we lost, but we would play on the road. But here's the wild thing: we would still make it to the semis, according to ESPN, based on our matchups. That we where we would end up. I think we would end up in the 10th seed, and I forgot the teams what we played, but we actually made it to the semis, which I thought was very interesting. But if we win out, by the way, so if we win this weekend and we win next weekend against SMU and ACC, they said that we would only make it to the quarters, which I thought was very interesting. So I don't know. I don't know where they get the metrics from. I don't know how they do that. It doesn't make sense to me. But again, this entire process doesn't really make sense to me. I hope next year going
Yeah.
into it, someone forces the committee to come out and explain their subjectivity, because there's nothing objective about how they pick these teams. So it's just like,
Nope.
hey, like we just like this and we don't like that, and I would be okay with that if they were just like, yeah, we just hate Miami and that's why we're gonna put them there. I'm like, okay, cool. At least someone's admitting it. You know what I mean? It's like I would just prefer some honesty.
Yeah,
But
I would rather have some honesty and at the same time, like, look at if that's what it is, at least Miami knows now what they need to do, and they can go out and they give middle fingers to everybody when they're playing to say, well, we know you don't like us, so we don't really care.
yeah,
Like, I'd love to see like if you want to play a proper enemy role, well, proper villain role, happy to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we just celebrated Thanksgiving, and then I was hopping on Twitter today and I saw this incredible story. So, Kenny Dillingham, because he got 9 wins, got a massive bonus. He got a $200,000 bonus for winning 9 games at Arizona State. And you would think, maybe I'll buy myself a car, maybe I'll get my wife something nice. Kenny Dillingham said, nay, nay. I care about the small folks. And before that, I actually saw a really great story about Kenny Dillingham, because they obviously there's the coaching carousel always starts around this time of the year, and they were considering him for some high profile jobs, and he said first, he was like, no, I love Arizona State. He's like, I went here, this is my alma mater, there's something special about coaching here, which I love. It's a very Mario thing. I love that. We love our alma mater. I know if either of us, which would never happen in any parallel universe, but if either of us were able to coach for that would be our dream job. Like I would take it over any other job, at any other program. But he decided to take his 200K bonus and give it to 20 off-field staffers, which gave each of them between 5 and 10 grand. I thought that was incredible. I thought that was what this is. Again, we talk about the X's and the O's, we talk about recruiting, we talk about realignment, but to me, this is the heart of college football. You know?
Yeah, and look at what he did. I mean, that last game where they beat BYU, they had the entire stadium on the field, and he's there yelling at everyone, trying to, hey guys, we haven't won this game yet. Let's get off this field. Let's have our proper celebration afterwards. You could just tell that everyone loves him there, and
Yeah.
he also was like really wanting to win this game. Young guy. These are exactly what you said. These are the stories that you want to hear about in college football, because how
Yep.
many coaching hires do you know of? How many coaches do you know in these big programs that they don't even make news about them hitting their bonus? Again, Arizona State was picked to finish
Dead last
last
in the Big 12.
in the
Dead
Big
last.
12.
Yep.
Maybe what, 4 wins all year they were predicted to have?
All they got to do is beat
And
Arizona, which is very, very possible It's very easy for them to make it, and they're going to be playing for a Big 12 championship. And I mean, I don't know if they'll win. I mean, they're the hot hand. I mean, pun intended, the Sun Devils.
I'm
Uh,
cheering for them.
I
That's for
mean,
sure.
too. I mean, to me, I love to see like programs like this that were literally in the gutter for over a decade. I mean, we as fans, we've seen some low times over the last 20 years, but I mean, that's nothing in comparison to like Arizona State. I mean, Arizona State has been literally in the Pac-12, done nothing
Yep.
really. They've had a few upsets here or there, but overall, I mean, the program has been in the gutter, and for them to have this turnaround and to see this, I just, again, to me, college football is always more than just football. The bread, the sweet part of it, the sweet part of the cake is the football we get to watch, but the reasons why you love it, the reasons why you follow it, it's the pageantry, it's the history, it's the stories like this where like this guy could have easily just kept this check. And in the grand scheme of things, like compared to what he makes, I think he makes 9 million or something like that. Like 200,000 isn't a lot to him, so it's whatever. But like I think it's a great gesture. I think it's 5 to 10 grand bonus. Let me tell you something. That's making anyone happy. You know what I mean? And I think that's a great way for him to pour into his community. I think these are things that like I wanted to take time and talk about this because I think these are stories that it's not just about X's and O's. It's not about the playoffs. There are other things that go on. And there are other things that make these programs run.
Yeah, well, let's apply that to Miami too, because you talk about programs that are struggling. What he just did was secured his support staff and
Mm-hmm.
help for a long time to come. Now they're not looking for their next job too, because as Miami fans, something that we've learned about our athletic department for a long time when it comes to support staff is it's a middle of the road job. It's a
Yeah.
job that someone comes from a smaller athletic department, they put in a couple of years, and they try to move on and go either to a larger collegiate program or they try to make their way into the professional sports like the Dolphins and the Heat and the Marlins and all of that. So
Yeah.
what he just did was keep his nucleus intact for at least a couple more years with a great gesture, and that's something
And
that I think more places can learn.
And it also signals to other people like, hey, who may be looking for a job. Maybe they're at a toxic environment or a toxic program, and they're like, yo, like that Arizona job, that guy over there, Kenny's doing something over there,
Yep.
and they're winning, and he's spreading the love, and it's like, bro, and he loves that program. He's dedicated to it. I mean, this guy could easily leave after. I mean, I'm not sure. Who knows? Like maybe in 2 weeks, we're doing a show after the season's over, and he's
Could you
accepting a
imagine
job
that?
at Florida,
Like
man.
they
I
win
mean,
the
like
Big
or something like
12, they go into the
yeah.
playoff, and all of a sudden you hear, "Oh yeah, he's the new coach at Florida Atlantic." Wait,
Yeah.
what?
Exactly. So, I just wanted to cover this story because I thought it was a great story. I thought it was a feel good story. But we will get back to some real football because that's what everyone's here for. And bragging rights are on the line this week, and we have some major matchups for rivalry week that will impact those college football playoff chances we were just talking about earlier. First, I want to take a look at what I'm calling the ACC versus SEC class up. We've got some awesome matchups. The first one I want to get to is one that's going to be occurring probably in about now, which is Georgia Tech at UGA. The Dogs are a 17.5 point favorite. What happens in Athens tonight, Rudy?
Carnage. I want to see carnage in the hedges.
Carnage.
Look, I hate the ACC like every other Miami fan out there, but there is something fitting if Georgia Tech were to
You mean
go
the
into
SEC?
Athens and get that win.
You mean the SEC?
No, I hate the SEC too, but I also hate my own conference. I hate the ACC, and it's something that if you saw me at the game on Saturday against Wake Forest, I let everyone know how much I hate the ACC as a conference, just from the stuff that we missed, the missed block in the back on the punt return, the million holding calls that get missed on Simeon Barrow daily. I hate the ACC with a passion, but it would be really funny to watch Georgia Tech beat Georgia because then you have likely the SEC champion that's going to get the automatic bid as somebody who has now what, 3 losses?
Yeah.
And one of them is to a middle of the road ACC team. It's going to help Miami out a lot and say, oh, but they lost to Georgia
I was
Tech.
just gonna say that.
Oh, yeah. Who else?
Yeah. And if when you look at that and the kind of the rigmarole of things, it's like, well, if again, I'll just say it. I don't think Georgia Tech's gonna beat Georgia.
No.
I think it'll be a close game though, because I do think that the weapons that Georgia Tech has and the play style that Georgia Tech plays, Last year they played them tough. I think they'll play them even more tough this year. It's very similar to like kind of what happened to us last year, right? Where except they actually beat us last year. They didn't beat Georgia last year, but
Yep.
I think this year they've got the weapons. They understand their limitations. I think Haynes King is a lot more healthy than he was a few weeks ago when he played us. And it's funny, like you watch any of the coverage on this game, and the only highlights they're showing from Georgia Tech is when they played us. That's it. There's literally no other game. Not the, I mean, they lost in the Notre Dame game, but like there's no other game except for the Miami game. So it would be really nice to see, Georgia Tech win. I don't think they are, but I love this time of the year where you've got, again, we're going to talk about three other games, but you've got a series of intra-conference foes where you've got the ACC and the SEC playing each other. What's sad to me is that this is something that's been going on for years and decades, and if someone doesn't step in, this could be something that goes away. We talked about it earlier this year about conference realignment. And what's sad to me is that the SEC is pushing to have more of an alignment with the Big Ten, which there's no rivalries there, right? Like, no one's going to
Yep.
care if Georgia plays, like, I don't know, like a Penn State. Like, no one cares about that game. You know what I mean? When Alabama played Wisconsin this year, no one watched that game. No one, and only people that cared about that game roughly was some Miami fans who found out Tyler Van Dyke tore his ACL, and they're like, "Oh yeah," but
Yep.
other than that, no one else cared. No one else talked about that game. So
Yeah,
it's
and
like it's
if
games
you go
like
back in the
these
day too, Chris, if you go back in the day, the old like rambling wreck car that like runs out for Georgia Tech, when that was brand new, Georgia Tech was
that was in
in
the
the SEC.
SEC. They're a founding member of the SEC. Which, fun
Yep.
fact, should the ACC implode, Georgia Tech can go back to the SEC because it's in their bylaws that a founding member can re-enter the SEC. So what's funny
Good
to me is
good luck, SEC. You got Vandy and you got Georgia Tech. Have fun with that.
literally. So it's like you guys might want to keep us around. You might want to keep it because I don't think you want Georgia Tech in your conference. But yeah, I have Georgia. I don't have them up big, but I would say by two touchdowns. I think that I'm giving them two touchdowns. I think it'll be a close game to pull out in the fourth quarter. Moving over to Kentucky, we've got Louisville heading to Kentucky. This is a game that is a rivalry of rivalries. And I don't mean like in the history or the pageantry, but it's like one of those things where both teams could suck. Both teams could be good. One team could be really good and the other team can suck, but like all bets are off. Because I've seen a really bad Kentucky team beat a really good Louisville team. And I've seen a really bad Louisville team beat a Kentucky team that's halfway decent, And it's like, you never know. Who do you have in this game? The
I
battle for
got
the
Louisville.
bourbon.
I got
Louisville.
Louisville. I think
Really?
Tyler Shuck plays really well. I think Isaac Brown, that
Oh,
freshman
he's
running
man.
back from Miami, is going to play really well too. And
Homestead.
look,
Yep.
go ahead.
No, I was saying he's from Homestead. That kid's like that kid's born and raised and for running and having a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, so I got Louisville. I mean, look, as bad as they've looked in a few games, they also come out when they're motivated and they want to win a game. They absolutely can play with anybody in the country. They gave Miami a scare and they beat Clemson in Death Valley. So
Yeah,
I'm going Louisville, and I just feel like they're the better team. And
I
I'd
think
love to
yeah,
see this SEC ACC. Let's see some middle of the road ACC teams beat some middle of the road SEC teams.
yeah. The funny thing with Kentucky, man, is Mark Stoop. He's a genius, and you can never count him out. So I'm not saying this is going to be a blowout, but I do think Louisville has the more talented team. I do think just the 1-2 punch of Shuck and that running back who is fast, super fast. I think he's going to be a little bit too much for the Kentucky defense, and Kentucky's just been so hit or miss. They've been so up and down. Louisville to a certain extent too, but Louisville's been plagued with injuries. And when you have like six key players injured throughout the season, it's hard to get that chemistry. It's hard to get like a thing going. So that's why I can excuse that sort of up and down roller coaster of a season from Louisville. But for Kentucky, I'm just like I don't understand, man. You beat Ole Miss and then you poop the bed the rest of the season. It's like, what's happening to you? But I have Louisville as well. Moving over to the Carolinas, we have South Carolina heading to Death Valley. We kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. Who do you have in this game?
I'm going to go with Pat McAfee. I'm going to go with the Cox
The
in this
Cats.
one. The Cax to slap Clemson around a little bit because The big matchup here, I think, is that defensive line and that pass rush from South
Yeah.
Carolina. When they're clicking, they're on fire, and this is a rivalry game for them. This is, the pride of the Palmetto State.
Yep.
So it's in Death Valley. I think that used to mean something. I don't think it really does anymore with this Clemson team, just after what happened with Louisville. So this is where I'll go and lean on the SEC and say South Carolina's look good in a lot of their games. They're on a hot streak right now. Some of their losses at home have been, a little suspect in terms of how they were treated by the officials. And
Yeah.
in this case, yeah, I think it's just all South Carolina.
Yeah. I think with it being a noon game, I'm hesitant because I would love to have seen this game at night, just so that Clemson could get the retribution from that last night game they had against Louisville where they lost. I think they're playing decent. Again, they had some pretty close games against Virginia Tech and Pitt. I'm looking at right here. They blew out Citadel, which you expect at home. Both those Virginia Tech and Pitt games were on the road, so you really can't kind of make a stake on that. I'm actually going to go with Clemson. I feel like Dabo's got something to prove. I feel like at the end of the day, he's really going to try and I think these kids are going to understand there's a shot. If they can I think South Carolina's path to getting into the playoff is a little bit harder for them. And I purposely stacked these things because I wanted to do like a sandwich technique. So I got SEC, but then I have the next two ACC teams winning. Also, again, Death Valley on the road. It's a noon game. I never like road teams on a noon for a noon game. It's never a good setup. So I'm picking the Tigers, and I need that ACC win. I need our numbers to go up.
I
Moving
got two
over,
ACC wins in that three.
uh,
I just have the wrong. I have a different one than you do. Yeah.
right, which is why it's funny that we picked that. Now on, guess what time it is? You already know what we're gonna talk about right now.
Is it the Timmy Jimmy fight?
Timmy! It's the Timmy Jimmy Bowl this year, boys and girls. That's what I'm calling it. It's gonna be that way until both programs get their ish together. So Florida is at Florida State. Listen, Florida State put up some numbers last week. It was against Charleston Southern. They won in like 18, 1-9 team, but you know, they got 2 wins. Yeah. I I hesitate to speak about this so much because it's not fun to make fun of like the handicapped, and it's just like you shouldn't pick on kids that are challenged, and these are two challenged teams. I sadly I'm picking Florida. I think Florida's gonna win this one. I think they're
Yeah,
clicking.
look, Billy
They're clicking.
Napier's got that team humming right now. They come off of wins against LSU and Ole Miss.
Okay.
I think that's
I think, yeah,
Florida
and I think
all
I think
day.
I think anyone watching this is going, duh, Florida's gonna beat FSU. They're on fire. But let's just, what the second thing we got to do now. Tinfoil hat theory. Here it comes.
Look, and here's the thing though, I will not shed a single tear if Florida State wins that game, but I won't shed a single tear if, Florida blows them out either.
Hear me out here. Hear me out here. What if Billy poops the bed and Mike Norvell looks like a hero getting the in-state win? What does that do for both programs? I don't care about the game because the game again is a Timmy Jimmy fight. What does this do for next season? And what does this do for the coaches should chaos ensue?
It reignites the seat under Billy Napier for sure, but I don't think it moves the needle for Mike Norvell and Florida State one iota. Like it's one of those
No,
where no, like
I
you're
feel like
already
this is their
hemorrhaging
super. No,
recruits
I
like
feel like
crazy. You beat the
legit. If I was an FSU player, this is my Super Bowl. I got blown out and I got my ass kicked by Miami. I've had literally every team that literally has a pulse beating me. They don't even need to be good. They just have to have a pulse beating me. Yeah, you can literally have the Gators come into Doak, and you
to
can make it
woke
happen.
Campbell.
And to Woke Campbell, what time is this game at? Let me see what time this game's at, boy. I want to see.
The only thing about this is that I would agree with you if it was a
Oh, and it's a
traditional
7
Florida State.
p.m. game. Man, you got to
Yeah.
get all them rednecks in Tallahassee liquored up, ready to
I
go.
would agree with you if it's a normal FSU team, but remember, Mike
I
Norvell
know.
heavily relies on transfers. These are all one and done portal players. These
Yeah.
guys don't know the significance between a Florida State Florida matchup. They have no idea. For them, they've already packed it up. They're done. Like, hey, I'm either transferring somewhere else next year, or I'm just gonna go to the combine and try to get myself on a roster on a practice squad because That's about it outside of what? Selling insurance, and they don't sell that in Florida for hurricanes, so
Yeah, not
time to
anymore.
go back to a different state.
Yeah. Thank you, Papa DeSantis, Daddy DeSantis. Got rid of all them insurance companies.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think I sadly I think this is going to be a blowout. I think the SEC takes this dub, takes it single handedly. But I've never wanted to cheer for FSU more than I want this year, just so I can watch just the chaos ensue between the two of them. And then, because could you imagine Florida like message boards? Like they will literally be on fire till next season if
They
FSU
will start
beats them.
building basements
Yeah,
to hide in. They don't have them now. They will start digging basements to hide in.
and literally they don't even care. They'll have water up to their nose in those basements. They're like, I'd rather drown. I'd rather drown in my basement than lose to Florida State again. Yeah, it would just be I, again. Both programs are in disarray. I mean, at least Florida is getting commits. I mean, I don't know what Florida State's gonna do, and ooh, it's not looking good in the offseason. But moving on from the ACC SEC Classic, we have some other traditional or historic matchups for rivalry week. I wanted to start off one that I think is the least lopsided, right? Because the ones we're going to get into after this one, I think are pretty. They're going to be like the SEC ACC games, but Texas at Texas A&M. It's the first time since 2011 since A&M left from the Big 12 for the SEC. Texas is a huge favorite in this, even though the spread doesn't say it. Everyone's pretty much picking Texas for the most part, I think. Winner goes to Atlanta to play Georgia for the SEC championship. Who do you have in this game, Rudy?
Leading up to this, I kept saying it was going to be A&M because I don't think they were going to lose a game at home again after they got embarrassed by Notre Dame. I think the way they played last week changes my mind completely. And with
Yeah.
remember when Texas A&M left the Big 12 to go to the SEC, that was a huge slap in the face
Oh
to
yeah.
Texas primarily because they knew that we're not going to play anymore.
Mhm.
Okay, well if we ever meet you again down the road, buddy, we have this one saved. Texas A&M made up another like two or three national championships from the 1920s because
Yeah.
some obscure newspaper that some small town created said that they were the national champions that year. All that tells me that Texas will probably wipe the floor with them now after the way Texas A&M played last week. So
Yeah.
I'll say Horns.
I think just the amount of talent that's on the Texas roster is just they should. You should. It's like Ohio State, right? Like Ohio State should beat Michigan handily tomorrow. I'm not saying Texas should handily beat Texas A&M because I think Texas A&M has a very talented roster. But when you look at the exits and the partial exodus from Texas A&M after Jimbo got fired,
Mhm.
you look at a locker room that I don't think has quite gotten its footing in terms of culture. I think Mike Elko's done an incredible job in his first year, but I mean, and when you read the reports, when you go on to texags.com and you read these things, that was a crazy locker room, like wild. Like it was like, do you remember that movie, The Program? Did you ever see that movie
Yeah.
earlier? I mean, apparently that's what it was like. And so
Well, that's
like,
what Jimbo's known for, though. He
right,
left. He left Florida State as a dumpster fire.
right. So to me, it's just like, I don't think, and like we saw last week, I mean, woof. Woof, Texas A&M. Like, what are you doing losing to Auburn in like what was it, triple overtime, quadruple over? I don't even remember what
Yeah.
it was. It was like some
Yeah.
ridiculous amount of overtimes. Like, one, you shouldn't have lost. Two, you should have put the thing away by the second overtime. Like, this is, especially with your roster, it's just inexcusable. So I'm the same way as you. At first, I was giving Texas A&M a slight edge. I think it'll still be a pretty close game. I think it'll be within 10 points, but I do think, and I think it'll be a close game up until the third quarter. I think midway through the third quarter, probably heading into the fourth, you'll see Texas start pulling away, and not just pulling away in points, but you'll just see the momentum start to shift in their direction. Kyle
Yeah.
Field will be lit. I mean, again, this is the first time they're playing since 2011. This is the first time both teams are playing each other as ranked opponents since 2004. So this is a huge game, and I can tell you, my boy lives in Sugar Land, Texas, which is just outside of Houston, and a lot of people he knows are Aggie fans. They're lit. They are ready for this game. It's going to be wild. There, I mean, don't be surprised again because the winner goes to Atlanta. This place will get turned. I mean, they do a bonfire. I'm not sure if they still do it anymore. They had that one really tragic one
Yeah.
a couple decades ago, but I mean, the
Yeah.
bonfire will be nothing compared to the partying if they beat Texas. So we will see. Next, we have the game. Don't understand why it's called that. I'm not a big fan of either school. I mean, I like Michigan because they're UM, but I could care less.
Because there's nothing else going on in their lives up there. That's why they call it the game.
The game, I guess. Yeah. Ohio State will be playing Michigan. The first time they met, which was kind of cool. I think the history of this is why I love rivalry because despite me not liking a lot of these teams, I still think what's beautiful is the pageantry and the history behind this. And so because it's the game, it's considered the best rivalry in college sports. They first played in 1897, but their first conference meeting was in 1918. Excuse me. Jesus, these numbers are so old. I can't even figure them out. I'm like, my God in heaven. Um, and they've basically been playing ever since. Fun fact, Michigan overall has been dominating the series. So they have 61 wins. Ohio State has 51. There's 6 ties. They've held the largest margin of victory, 86-0 in 1902. And they have the longest winning streak, 9 games from 1901 to 1909. Again, a time of irrelevance for any team in that time because there were probably only 7 teams in that. So
Yep. It was Ohio
Irene
State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Army,
and Rutgers.
and Rutgers.
And
Exactly.
Rutgers, because they're the ones who invented the sport, apparently.
Yep.
They once played in what's called the game of the century back in 2006. I remember that game because I was on a fraternity retreat at Peace River when that game was occurring, and somehow we were able to get the game there. And I remember watching the game on like a phone or something like that. It was like the first iPhone or something like that. I forgot how we watched it. But can the Wolverines pull the upset of the century, Rudy, tomorrow?
Slim, but
High noon
not
kickoff too.
0, but I don't think they will. I think it's one of those there's so much on the line there that I feel
Mhm.
like if this was a better Michigan team, then yes, but I don't know if this is the one. I know you may have a theory about this though.
Yeah, so the game is a high noon game in Columbus, and it's gonna apparently be very cold. I'm looking up the weather right now, see if it's updated. But they usually put this on ESPN. Where did they put that? They're not putting it. Oh, here it is. Hold on. Let me look this up. Wow. Wow. Michigan only has an 8.1% chance of winning according to ESPN. Woof. Woof. It's going to be 28 degrees and sunny. So here's my thing. No one likes playing in the cold, and no one likes throwing in the cold. And Michigan's bread and butter is running. So I think if Michigan can keep their running game going and they can somehow channel their best running game, because last week they struggled for a little bit against Northwestern. I mean, they cleared house and blew them out, obviously, but their run game in the second half was a little meh. And so if they can clean that up, again, this type of weather suits them. And here's the other thing. Ohio State is still down 3 linemen, specifically on the left side. That's a big deal. And again, you cannot look at FSU, right? FSU played one of their best games against us. You know what I mean? Like when you think about it, they should have. Everyone said we were supposed to blow them out by 49 points, and they kept it within like 25. I think you know what I mean. So you can't discount. I mean that's a terrible team. Michigan mediocre. Again, they're playing. They haven't had a. I can't even. I think it was like the early 90s was the last time they had a 4-game win streak. Every other time it's been 3-3. So we will see. Who do you have again? Did you say already? I forgot.
I went Ohio State. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where the run game could be more of a factor if this was back when they used natural grass. They're
Yeah.
all artificial turf up there now. At this point in the season, the grass has been long dead, and it was usually like they had to paint it green to make it look nicer, and there's big blotches of dirt and stuff. Well, that doesn't exist anymore thanks to plastic and rubber. So, it makes it a little bit more consistent of a playing surface. But yeah, hey, who knows? Maybe Jeremiah Smith doesn't like playing in the cold as much, being a Florida guy, and he might be regretting his decision going to Ohio State at this point. But that's
Fingers
why they play the game.
crossed. Come back home, Jeremiah. Come back home. My hope is that
There's a
Michigan
transfer
blows.
portal. It's fine.
I know exactly. Just come on. We'll give you loads of money. On to another
I mean,
bowl, the Iron Bowl. We've got Auburn at Bama. All right. And I know, let me tell you something. Auburn would like revenge for last year's last second Hail Mary from Jalen Monroe. Can the Tigers walk out of Tuscaloosa with a W?
they could. I mean,
I
look at
think
how
I
bad Alabama's been playing. They could.
and they did not only
Like,
that, but they beat A&M, who is, I think, better than Alabama.
yeah, and
Like,
offensively, like they were kind of exposed last week in terms of if you just shut down Jalen Milrow because all he can really do is run. he only really throws the ball more than 30 yards down the field. There is no short passing. It's either like behind the line of scrimmage or it's 40 yards down the field. So
Yeah.
if you shut him down as a runner, you got a chance. And look, Auburn just did that to Texas A&M. So momentum.
That was literally my first point I was gonna make. You're so
Yeah.
that's why we're there. We're there, man. We're there. Yeah, I think Auburn. They just played Texas A&M, who has that dual threat quarterback as well. So they're going to be fresh and ready to go, which was I mean, you couldn't ask for a better like back to back game because they're very similar styles in terms of the way they play. And so I think Auburn will definitely give them a run for money, but I'm definitely taking Bama. Like, listen,
Yeah, I would
Auburn is
lean Bama
terrible.
too, but
I
what
mean,
do they say?
Auburn
Closer
is
than the experts think.
yeah, yeah. And again, rivalry game. Again, it's always a rivalry game. But here's the problem, though. I feel like I'd have to go look this up. I didn't look this up. I won't lie to you. It was Thanksgiving week. I didn't do that much research on this, but I feel like Auburn doesn't do as well in Tuscaloosa. I feel like the last couple years it's been pretty much a blowout when Alabama plays Auburn in Tuscaloosa. Whereas it's kind of like, oh well, you kind of remember like the was it the kick six where they got the return. So it's like that was in Auburn. So it's like in the plains, it's like I don't know in Tuscaloosa.
And if you look, Alabama lost at Vandy, at Oklahoma, and did they lose at Ole Miss as well, or was that at home?
No,
I forget if they lost at home to Ole Miss or not. Either
who?
way, 2 of their at least 2 of their losses of their 3 are on the road. So if this one's in Tuscaloosa, it's a little less
Yeah,
exciting.
Auburn is not a good road team at all. They're really bad. They're really bad. They're like A&M. They're a really bad road team.
They're not
They're just not
they're
good.
not a good home team either. I'll tell
No.
you. They're
Yeah,
not
how
a
do you lose
good
to
team,
Cal?
period, but
5 turnovers at Cal. Come on. Get it together, guys. Get
yeah.
it together. Anyways, the last game we'll cover won't have a catchy name, but it's actually one of the oldest in college football. It is Notre Dame traveling to LA to play the Trojans of USC. The rivalry began in 1929. They play for the Jeweled Shalala or Shalala or well, I don't even know what that's called.
The Shillelagh,
The
yes.
Shillelagh. The Shillelagh. Yeah, I don't get it, don't understand it, but I'm gonna have Notre Dame, even though they haven't really played a competitive schedule that much in the last 4 games that they've won have been Army, Navy, FSU, and Virginia. Like you're like, yes, they've looked good, and everyone's like, oh, Notre Dame's clicking, and then I'm like, you're also playing like not good teams, like you should
Yeah.
be, like you know what I mean, like FSU and Virginia are the worst teams in the ACC. Besides, I mean, Cal record aside, like I think they're actually semi decent. I think they're better than both Virginia and FSU. But then Army and Navy, like we obviously saw they were frauds. So, what do you think? Who do you think? I mean, do the can the Trojans win?
It pains me. I want them to win. I'm a big fan of USC in terms of how they're, perceived in the national landscape of things. I think they're another one of those programs that's good for college football when they're really good and they're a major market. But sadly, I don't think they have. I don't think they have the team to really pull this win off. I was watching them against UCLA, and look, that game looked closer than it should have been. UCLA is not a great team either. So I'm going to say it's going to be Notre Dame all the way. I think that's going to run it down their throats.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame sadly is just. I mean, if you would have asked me this in week one when USC played LSU, I would have been like, ooh, wait, Notre Dame better watch out. But we've seen how
Yep.
the season's kind of transpired. And I have Notre Dame pretty big too. I would say they're 3 touchdown favorite for me. I think they'll win by max 3, possibly the least 2. I think they'll win by. I think they'll go up by at least 2 touchdowns. I think also Marcus Freeman, he has something to prove, and he knows he has something to prove. And I saw some random stat about him compared to Brian Kelly at LSU, and I think not to say it's a narrative he's paying attention to, but I think that's just something that's kind of like a monkey on his back, and I think he would love to get into the playoff before Brian Kelly does.
The
So
only thing though is that with all the comparisons of how the records look and how they perform against people, if you just look at them as human beings, Marcus Freeman is above and beyond Brian Kelly in terms
yeah,
of who they are and how he's probably liked over at Notre Dame versus how Brian Kelly left South Bend. And now they're waking up to it over there in Baton Rouge.
yeah, but I also think it's a different game. It's I think Marcus Freeman is not that he's inherited Brian Kelly's team, but Notre Dame is Notre Dame. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna get their crop of players. And this is the other thing. With that said, I think Notre Dame, that's what they are too. They're not going to be elite. They're not going to be an elite team. They're going to look really good because the way their schedule is always set up, and because they're an independent and they don't have to play a consistent conference schedule year in and year out. That gives them an advantage, I think. But they're always going to get like B minus players or with a few A plus players, but they're going to be a B minus team. They're going to look good because they play these traditional teams. And especially in years like this, where you have a USC who's kind of having a bit of a down year, and they're not as good as they were expected to be, it's going to be, oh, they beat USC by 3 touchdowns or 2 touchdowns if they win. You know what I mean? It's going to look good for them. So that's the one thing I just can't stand about. They're kind of like a new age Bama. Not a new age, but Bama's a new age version of Notre Dame. They get credit for stuff they really just should not get credit for. It's like no one cares, but they'll probably be in the playoff, and we will. Hopefully, I love to actually play Notre Dame in the playoff. That would be great to knock them out of the playoff. That would be fun because I think we would beat them. Well, Rudy, another one is in the books. The regular season is over. Next week, we will shift, hopefully, to Championship Saturday coverage. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Until next week, be good, y'all. Win the weekend. And as always, go Canes.
Beat Syracuse, please.
In Jesus'
Please.
name. Have a good week, y'all. Love y'all.